Louisiana in 1929. That's where we're going today on Recipe Reviver. When my wife and I got married, we went to New Orleans, Louisiana for our honeymoon. And if you know anything about New Orleans, you know that it is a place of history, it's a place of music, and it's a place of food. In fact, when we first touched down, one of the first things we heard was that New Orleans was a foodie city. And for a guy like me, that makes me pretty happy. But we are going to be making a recipe today from Mandy's favorite Louisiana recipes, which actually was originally published under the title of Mirations and Miracles of Mandy. And Mandy is just a made-up character that Natalie Scott came up with. And if you read the foreword, it's really quite sad because you see, Mandy is sort of this creation of the cooks that were hired in New Orleans and Louisiana as a whole. And as you go through the book, there's all these sayings and things that Mandy would have supposedly said, written in dialect that is really not appropriate today. However, I've got a feeling there's some pretty decent recipes here. So we're going to be trying one of those today, and we're going to be making what is simply called nut bread, which really is a pecan bread, and we'll see how it turns out. This is a pretty large recipe today. We're actually going to start out with 4 cups of flour. I believe this is for 2 loaves of the pecan nut bread that we're making. But the first step is to sift together the 4 cups of flour. We've got a teaspoon of salt. We have 4 teaspoons of baking powder. And we're just going to put that into a bowl and then add some more ingredients. We're then going to mix in a cup of sugar. And after that, we're going to add an egg, which the recipe specifically calls for to be very well beaten, and mix that in before adding our other wet ingredient. There's only 2 wet ingredients. There's the egg and a cup of milk. So we're going to do those 2 and then get those well combined. Really, this is a very, very simple bread. There's not a lot to this. Finally, we're going to add our pecans. We've got a cup of chopped pecans. Now, I know at the store you can buy pecans already chopped today. That obviously would not have been a thing in the 20s, most likely. I don't know. I didn't live through that. However, I just took a Ziploc bag and used a rolling pin to beat them out until I had a cup of chopped pecans. And this is a very interesting looking dough here because there's not a whole lot of moisture, as I previously mentioned. But I'm going to actually put the spoon down, do some hand kneading, and see if we can get this to look a little more like bread dough. Well, it took a little bit of work, but I did finally manage to make this into something that looks like a dough. I don't know if I can call this a bread dough. It's extremely dense, and as you know, there's not a whole lot of moisture here, but at least it did turn into something that holds together on its own. I'm going to split this into 2 halves, and the recipe calls to let this sit for about 20 minutes to rise. So I'm going to shape these into kind of loaf-shaped pieces here and put them straight into a greased bread pan. And I have actually never worked with a recipe that called to let something rise without having yeast in it. Now, I know that the baking powder is leavening. However, I've just never done a recipe that called for a bread dough to rise without yeast. So we'll see what happens. I'm really curious to see if these will shape into something that is risen like a somewhat traditional bread dough. I'm not sure. We'll find out. But in 20 minutes, I'll check back in with you, and then these are going to go in the oven at a moderate temperature. So before I even try this, I need to admit that I think I screwed up. I was doing some research while this was baking, and I saw that apparently there is something that is called nut bread, or southern nut bread, that is more like a cookie bar than it is an actual bread. It's just bread in the name alone. And those are often done in a rectangular pan or a square pan or some sort of baking dish that is not a loaf pan. And this definitely did not expand or lift like a regular bread would. It is very dense. However, I gotta say, this smells fantastic. It smells nutty, obviously, from the pecans. It smells sweet. I think this is more like a cookie bar than it is an actual bread. But I took a slice off this, and I'm gonna try it. And the flavors are still gonna be there. The texture is still gonna be there. I don't think it's gonna be a whole lot different than it would be in a rectangular pan, except for the fact that, you know, the shape is different. So let's give it a try and see. You know, this is not too sweet. It actually is just the right amount of sweet. It's got a little bit of crunch on the outside, but the inside is super dense, and surprisingly, for being not much in terms of wet ingredients in there, because there's just the milk and the egg, this is not as dry as I thought it was going to be. I really think that the flavor of the nuts is light. If you think about the ratio of the nuts to the flour, there's 4 cups of flour here and 1 cup of nuts, so it's not overwhelmingly nutty either, but yet there's enough nuts that is the flavor. I think this would be really great with coffee or tea or something as an afternoon snack. Give it a try, see what you think, and don't make the mistake that I made by doing a loaf pan. Use a rectangular pan. This is really good stuff. Give it a try. I actually really like this.